Well, we've got a good amount of people here, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here. There's a lot of new faces in the room, new urgent tech teamers, shall we say. So thanks for coming to this meeting. We meet 4 times a year, and really the purpose is to talk about more technical aspects of Great Salt Lake. So research we want to do, we administer the grant program, and really kind of everything that falls in that umbrella. So we'll go ahead and start with some introductions. So I'm Marisa Weinberg. You get all my 5,000 emails a week. I'm the Sovereign Lands Program Manager for Great Salt Lake, and I run these meetings. So we'll just go around the room first and then online.
Ben Sireman, I'm Deputy Director of Forestry, Fire and State Lands.
Jamie Barnes, Director of Forestry, Fire and State Lands.
Ryan Brew, I'm with OGM.
Kim Colburn, I'm also with OGM.
And the bill of Nature Conservancy.
Linda Freitas, Friends of Great Salt Lake.
Craig Miller, Division of Water Resources.
Pete Goodwin, I'm with the Geological Survey.
I'm Claire Spangenberg. I'm with the Geological Survey.
Allison Smith, I'm with Forestry, Fire and State Lands.
Tommy Thompson, Forestry, Fire and State Lands.
Jen.
Oh, it's Jennifer Biggs, Forestry, Fire and State Lands.
Ryan. Take it.
Ryan Gordy with Cargill Salt.
Caleb Owen, also Forestry, Fire and State Lands.
Hannah Meyer, I'm a PhD student at the University of Utah.
Alan Robinson, Forestry, Fire and State Lands.
Hurlow Wing, Forestry, Fire and State Lands.
Keith Hambrick, also.
And when I said there were new faces in the room, it meant that I coerced all of my coworkers to come in. Thank you for being here. And then online, we have a lot of people. So we've got Annie Putman, Claire, you're in the room, Connor Simon, Craig is also in the room, Emily Clark, Emily Hamill, Gemma Tercy, Eddie Hoban, Hugh Hurlow, Jack Ray, Jim Harris, Dennis Gardner, Jaron Andrews, Jason Gibson, Jeff Demblaker, Jeff Warren, Joel Briscoe, John Luft, Leanna Littler-Wolf, Lila Amati, Mama Davik, Rob Dubuque, Sam Dutta, and Wei Zhang. Thank you guys for attending online. We will go ahead and get started with our first agenda item, which are Great Salt Lake updates. So the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council meets tomorrow, and I apologize that both meetings fell within the same week. So can't wait to see you all again tomorrow. And that meeting will be at the Eccles Wildlife Center in Farmington. And just so you know, all the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council meetings next year will also be in Farmington. So no meeting confusion there. At the meeting tomorrow, I'll be giving a project report on our fiscal year 24 project work for the Advisory Council. Currently, we have not allocated any of our funding for fiscal year 25. So this is also a call to you all. If you have any project ideas or project work that you think would fit the Advisory Council bill, please let me know. You can also reach out to Tim Hawks, but at this point, we're looking to start contracting some projects. So anyone with great ideas, come talk to me. And then moving on to the Salinity Advisory Committee, I will pass the mic to Ben, who can speak more coherently to the Salinity Advisory Committee.
Thanks, Marisa. So not much has changed or much to report at this point, other than that we're at about 121 grams per liter. In a month or so, we'll probably hit the the high salinity level or so, maybe a month and a half as we get into October, November. So yeah, 121 grams per liter. That's where it puts us in a really good spot, coming into probably into some drought years, or at least that's what people tell me. So I'm really pleased that the good runoff years and then the management of the berm has resulted in some really good salinity. So that's great. As far as the berm is concerned, we've left that open. It's been flowing since July of last year when it eroded. There's somewhat of a V-notch that eroded, and it's been flowing between, I think it goes around 700 to, do you remember the high flow was on that?
900?
I think it was, for sure it was up above 1,200, but I wanted to say there was even more running through at one point. But anyhow, there's been some strong flows running through the breach for the last year, and it continues to do so. The initial,
Just how far?
what's that?
South to north.
Yes, south to north, exactly. So we're equalizing lake levels now. The south arm is slightly about 1.5 feet above the north arm right now. So that gap that existed up to 5 feet at one time is closing. So those things are equalizing, which is how we intend to manage that berm, is to release water after we get the desired effect in the south arm. As far as the V-notch goes, USGS has done some acoustic bathymetry, something that goes above my head, but they get the bathymetry of the berm, and what they're telling me is that it's likely eroded more than the V-notch. So it's now more like a trapezoid. So there's been some additional erosion, and they're finalizing that now. So we'll get some information now about what that shape looks like here in the next probably 3 to 4 weeks as they're finalizing that. So we're excited to see what's happened. As we move into the fall, I don't think there's any immediate action that needs to be taken to raise or lower the berm at this point. I think the threat of being Hurlow and salinity that we kind of talked about at our last salinity committee has passed. Now we're going to be looking out into the future to see what the forecast looks like, see if we can get some climate modeling to suggest maybe what the winter might bring, and then decide if we want to leave that open or perhaps raise it or even lower it. There's a lot of benefits to all scenarios, and also some risks as well. So we'll have to weigh those out. But I did also want to mention that as we're doing our comprehensive management plan, which you all will receive an invite to participate in the survey, let us know what we did well in the last one, what we could do better in, and how we might come up with some new ideas. You should also be aware that we intend to update a salinity management plan in the same time frame that will be appended to our management plan. So it won't be part of the management plan. It'll be something that can be living as we know that we're probably be learning and changing that in the next 10 years. So we do look forward to getting that salinity management plan up and running and being able to have a plan for how we manage that that's based off of what we've observed over the last few years. Lastly, I wanted to just mention, as far as the salinity advisory committee goes, we did release this week actually a request for qualifications for an engineering analysis of the berm for the breach, the breach for the berm. So what we're looking for is someone that might have some ideas about how we can better manage flows. And I think there's a whole lot of complexities with the north arm and south arm flows, and as everybody knows, there's different densities of the brines that make it challenging to be able to prevent north arm to south arm flows when the breach is open, and then vice versa, south arm to north arm. Sometimes if we have big water years, we may actually want to be able to import brines from the north to the south and vice versa. We also want to be able to move it more easily than having to mobilize heavy construction equipment and move 5-pound rocks. Like we'd like something that's a little more adaptable and something we can micromanage a little more, and it's not so hard to get in and move it when the flows are big. So anyway, that's hitting the streets. There was an appropriation this year to support that. It won't pay for the full engineering, but I think what it'll do is get some creative thinkers out there to tell us how we can do this in an affordable manner. And then we'll go after that and hopefully seek some grant funding or other sources of funding to help support that. So that's my update. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Does anyone have questions for Ben? Thank you for your very thorough update.
Yes.
I mean that in a good way. And also welcome Tim Davis to the room, our Deputy Great Salt Lake Commissioner. Not to call you out, but we're happy you're here. So moving on to Great Salt Lake Tech Team updates. And this mostly concerns our Great Salt Lake Tech Team grant program. If you received a tech team grant either in fiscal year 24 or in our current fiscal year, I am starting to piece together presentations for next year. So if you did have a grant that ended in June, or you have a current grant and you want to get on the presentation calendar, definitely reach out to me to reserve your spot. Again, these meetings are in February, May, September, and December. So it's not too early for you fiscal year 25 people to book up a spot. And so that said, our fiscal year 25 grants are underway. We apologize for contracting issues. This round, we had some issues with HB 335 that popped up, and we had to reinvent a lot of our contracting language to adhere to that bill. Also with changing finance staff, we had some delays, and so we really apologize for that. I think we're all signed and good to go now. and really excited to see all of your research that will come to us next year. Hopefully we won't have any of those issues moving forward with contracts for next year, but if you have any questions or issues, you can reach out to me anytime. I'm happy to make things better or try to. And so as we mentioned at previous meetings, we are restructuring the way we're doing these grants in fiscal year 26. And so fiscal year 26 will start July 1st of next year. These projects / research grants are going to be more of a procurement style rather than just releasing hot topics where you submit your research proposals. We're going to ask for more specific research and you'll have an opportunity to submit proposals that way. For example, we discussed that there's a need for more brine fly research, and so look for a procurement type RFP where we specifically outline the type of brine fly research that we wish to achieve on the lake. So it's going to be more that type of structure, but definitely more details to come at our December meeting and then afterward. And I know since that's totally different than how we've been doing it, if you ever have questions or concerns, reach out to me or Ben, but me, and then I'll talk to Ben about it. And we're happy to address your concerns. But those were all the tech team updates. Does anyone have any questions about, I guess, anything I just said or meeting dates? Or...
I might just add to that. We did a great job summing that up, but we hope that when we're targeting research questions that will help us better manage the lake and our partners and everybody involved, that this is the body that's helping form those questions. So we don't have any, we don't intend to take that from the, the tech team, but hope that everybody will help bring those ideas and questions, to this body so we can come up with really good, targeted research questions that deliver, something for us that helps us better manage the lake. So hope you all got your thinking caps on and be
we got a question online. Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, I just wanted to, thank you for explaining that. I'm just curious. It's not a simple task to balance the depth of different research questions when you prioritize them in an RFP. I'd strongly suggest you form some kind of committee to help you get that balance, because in the past, the RFP or the hot topics, as they were called, it sometimes went into an imbalance where some elements were just tasks and other elements were entire research areas involving hundreds of possible tasks. And you have to make sure you got the balance that will actually drive you forward. And so I think my suggestion is have some kind of committee, subcommittee, help you prioritize what those research questions will be. That's it.
Thanks, Bill. I'm glad you mentioned that. We do have our tech team subcommittee that has previously met to rank and review grant proposals. And we did discuss in that committee the need to continue that committee and open it up to those that want to be involved in formulating those questions. But I do agree that we need time outside of this meeting to better develop that as we're kind of moving into uncharted territory. So yeah, I appreciate that comment.
And Bill, I think your point is exactly why we're moving this direction, is because that was kind of something that I think Marisa and I observed when we both started, filling this role, is that the net was cast so wide that we were oftentimes getting kind of a variety of research, I guess, proposals that maybe weren't so clear about how it was going to help affect our management. And I think all the research is great. I mean, it all contributes, but at this point, there's so many things that we need to know to better manage the lake that we want to be more targeted. And last year we attempted to do that, but I think what ended up happening was that we wanted to broaden the scope actually and allow people to come and then have them tell us why it helps with the management of the lake. But I think in the the future, it might be some hybrid approach. We'll see like what types of questions we get formulated from this committee and from the subcommittee. And then if we still don't have enough there, we can always cast the net wide again. But I appreciate that, and I think it'll be folks like you and others that have a strong knowledge of this. Yeah, Bill, I think you did volunteer yourself, so I wanted to hopefully you're good with that. But yeah, hopefully you will be willing to do that. And I know others that have different disciplines, it'll be critical that we utilize your knowledge to ask the right questions and make sure we get good proposals. So appreciate you bringing that up and volunteering, even if you didn't know you were going to.
Great. So let's go ahead and move on to our first presentation of the day. We have two very UGS heavy presentations, which is great because we're in a UGS meeting room. So thanks UGS for being great partners. We're really excited to hear about your tech team grant work. So I'll pass the mic over to Claire and Hugh. Hugh is online. We got Claire in the room. I assume maybe you're both driving, but either which way, I will stay here. You're welcome to if you want to stay there. If you want to come up to podium.
I'll stay here. You guys sound nice.
I mean, if we have. Okay, is that look good for everybody? Okay.
I'm Spangenberg. I work in the groundwater wetlands program for UGS. And I am speaking on behalf of myself and Hugh Hurlow and a couple of our other coworkers, Rebecca Molinari and Diane, and we all work on this project. That was funded by the tech team in fiscal year 22 and then 24, I believe. And so this is our Great Salt Lake Shorelands Preserve water budget, stream monitoring, vegetation mapping, and remote sensing analysis. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, the Great Salt Lake Shorelands Preserve, it's about 4,400 acres. It's owned and managed by the Nature Conservancy. It's about 25 miles north of Salt Lake City in this little red rectangle here. And it stretches from just south of the Antelope Island Causeway to just above the Farmington Bay Waterfowl Management Area. It's comprised mainly of fringe and impounded wetlands and upland habitat, and happens to be located in Davis County, one of the fastest growing areas in Utah. So it's subject to a lot of land use changes. As land changes over from agricultural to residential and commercial. So for our project, we wanted to create a water budget for the preserve. We wanted to assess the potential impact of ongoing land cover changes on water availability to the wetlands in the preserve and to update the wetland mapping. So this is a overview of for our water budget. These are our water budget sites. I apologize, they're very actually small on the slides, but the circles on the map represent areas where we measured surface water flow. The squares represent where we took groundwater measurements. And then there's two triangles right here and right here. And those are places where we set up continuous monitoring sites on the Freeport Drain and Case Creek, which are two of the main surface water inflows to the preserve. I also wanted to just point out a couple of things on this map.
We changed the view so
Yeah, maybe we have the X on the people.
there we go.
I think you can hide like the people on the side too, so it's like really full screen. Spotlight. Spotlight. That's one.
Then you can smaller by the people if you really want to also.
Small one. That is like a series.
Yeah.
I don't know, Craig, we like you on the camera.
Yeah, so I just wanted to point out a couple other main spots on this map where we have surface water inflow onto the preserve, and that's this agricultural drain over here. This is, we call it the B5 drain. There is the Syracuse drain, which is a big stormwater drain. The Freeport drain is a big stormwater drain. And then Case Creek and Holmes Creek are two creeks that flow onto the preserve. And then you have on the west side a lot of agricultural land that's slowly being converted over to residential. You have the West Davis corridor actually shares about over 5 miles of boundary with the north side of the preserve. It goes kind of down this way and along the whole northern boundary of the preserve, or most of it at least. And yeah, so on the west side, you have a lot of like agricultural runoff, accounts for a lot of the surface water, and then you have a lot of storm water and kind of the center part of the preserve, and then creeks over here on the east side. This is kind of a conceptual diagram of our water budget. So on the right, you have the Wasatch Front with water moving to the west, and then the Great Salt Lake is over on the left. And so our water budget equation that we're going to be, I'll talk you guys through how we calculated, was groundwater in plus stormwater or surface water in plus precipitation should be about equal to groundwater out, surface water out, evapotranspiration, and change in storage. So the Shorelands Preserve kind of falls about here on this diagram where I have it highlighted. And there's two aquifers that we kind of looked at for this project. We mostly focused on the shallow aquifer, unconfined aquifer that's here, because that's the water that's going to be available for the managers to work with, and the water that's available for the wetland plants to use also. There's also the deep aquifer that we don't touch on too much in our water budget, other than the fact that there's a couple artisanal wells that pop up along the preserve that contribute some water to the surface. So yeah, along the top of my slides, I'll just keep the water budget equation pulled up and then kind of highlight in colors what variable I'm talking through. So for groundwater inflows onto the preserve, we use Darcy's law, which is that the specific discharge of groundwater should equal the hydraulic conductivity times the hydraulic gradient times average depth. So for hydraulic conductivity, we used kind of an average for fine sands, which is the substrate that most of the preserve sits on top of. For the hydraulic gradient, we installed 7 shallow groundwater monitoring wells that are in those little tiny, so sorry, they're so small, those little tiny squares. And so we used the groundwater levels from those wells to calculate the hydraulic gradient. And then for A would be the cross-sectional area for the preserve. So we used about 20 feet depth for the shallow aquifer, multiplied by the northwest to the southeast kind of transect length of the preserve. And for that value, we calculated about 1,500 acre feet per year of groundwater preserve. For surface water, we did 2 kinds of measurements. For the main inflows at Case Creek and the Freeport Drain, we set up continuous monitoring sites that collect data every hour. And to get the annual discharge, you calculated the area under this line for the whole year, and then we averaged it out over the years that we were doing this project, which was 2021 through fall 2023. And then for all the other inflows, we measured them seasonally. So in the fall and during spring runoff, and then during the agriculture or the irrigation season, we did other measurements in 2021, 2022, and 2023, and then extrapolated over the whole years and averaged them. So this is kind of the breakdown of our surface water inputs onto the preserve. So Case Creek is obviously the major input, contributing about 5,200 acre feet per year, followed by the Freeport Drain, Syracuse Drain was a stormwater drain, Holmes Creek, and then lumped together all the rest of the storm drains and the agricultural drains. And so we calculated the surface water input to be about 15,900 acre feet per year. For precipitation, we used GridMet data and averaged the precipitation over the years that we study, which is about 5,700 acre feet per year. Now onto the other side of the water budget equation. For evapotranspiration, we used OpenET to get our measurements. It's kind of an open source software or online data source that you can use to get to estimate water consumption over an area. We also compared it to the vegetation mapping that Pete did, where we applied known evapotranspiration rates to map the vegetation communities and then apply that to the shape files to calculate the evapotranspiration. It was pretty close to what we got for OpenET. And so for evapotranspiration on the preserve, we got about 12,000 acre feet per year. Groundwater out, we calculated again with the Darcy flux equation, like we did for the groundwater in flow, and we got about 400 acre feet per year. And surface water out was pretty difficult to actually measure. So we did measure as many channelized outflow areas as we could, and we got about 9,200 acre feet per year, but that's far from representative of how much surface water actually flows out of the preserve, since a lot of it sort of diffuses out into like these big frag fields along the lakeshore. And those are very difficult to measure. So we actually tried to come up with a different way to calculate for surface water out. So what we did was we created this sort of outflow area on a map here, which is these frag fields. And for the purpose of our water budget, we are kind of working off an assumption that most of the surface water out is actually consumed by the Phragmites in the lake margins. So we used OpenET again, oopsies. So we used OpenET again and got the ET values for this outflow area and subtracted the precipitation of that area and the groundwater outflow from the whole preserve to get the surface water out under that assumption that most of that water is being converted into ET. And for surface water out, we got about 12,700 acre feet. And that actually balanced our water budget really pretty well. So this is kind of the breakdown of our water budget. The average total inflows for the preserve is 25,090 acre feet per year. And then the total outflows are 25,240 acre feet per year. And so on this pie diagram, the blues represent the inflows and the reds represent the outflows, and it's about an even split, which is pretty good for a water budget. And so then we went on to vegetation and wetland mapping for preserve. We're doing my notes. This is not the part that I worked on. We mapped the different vegetation classes and different hydrology for the preserve. On the left, you can see that it's a lot of yellow, which is Phragmites. And that is pretty much the dominant vegetation class for a lot of this area. There's also a lot of wet meadows and marshes that you can see in green on the map on the left. And then on the right is the hydrology mapping, and there's a lot of permanently flooded and saturated areas that kind of overlap with where the frag is. And then a lot of other areas of seasonal flooding and some dry. And then they compared vegetation mapping over the last 40 years, kind of look at changes over time, with kind of a big asterisk that it's hard to do one-to-one comparisons between these because different mappers map things differently and use different veg classes and everything. So it's kind of hard to do one-to-one comparisons, but a couple of things we can say about these changes over time is that you can pretty clearly see a big increase in wet meadow and marsh vegetation, which is the Phragmites, expanding into the lake bed over time. You also see an increase in dry emergent vegetation over time, that's the orange, and a decrease in ponded water, which is the blue. And then the last part of our project was an NDVI analysis, which is the normalized difference vegetation index, which is basically a multispectral data where the greener a pixel is, the denser and healthier the vegetation is. Darn it. So, it's not always like a good thing to have a high NDVI. I mean, I guess in this case, because we're fracking. So we created slope maps over the last 30 years on the top and the last 10 years on the bottom. And you can see the majority of increases in NDVI is due to Phragmites expansion. And we broke the reserve down into a couple other sections, looking at NDVI changes over time and wanted to look at some model explanatory variables. So we looked at climate, hydrology, land cover, year, and management practices, and actually found that management played the largest role in the vegetation patterns over the last 10 years. You see this little red striped section over here. This is a part of the preserve that they do a lot of Phragmites treatment. And so while it says it's decreasing over time, that's actually a good thing because they're treating the Phragmites pretty effectively in that area. And then these big green blobs are outside of the preserve and they're out on sovereign land in the lake bed that doesn't get treated as much, and that's why you see an increase there. And so the two factors that seem to affect veg patterns are finding new water sources that allow the managers to irrigate fields and creating new ponds, and Phragmites management, leading to reduced cover of Phragmites. So for this project, we really had some things that we wanted to accomplish. We really wanted to be able to provide valuable data to Great Salt Lake researchers and stakeholders. We wanted to fill in some data gaps along the east shore for surface water. And we wanted to give the Shorelands managers valuable tools that they can use in their planning and management moving forward. I think we were pretty successful in that, and the key takeaways for our project, I think, would be that our monitoring indicates some temporal differences in water availability across the preserve based on water sources like stormwater versus agricultural water. They peak at different times of the year, and we were able to show that, and we can share that with the managers, and they can move water around based on that. We were able to create a baseline of water availability that they can use for management planning. We updated the vegetation mapping that can be used for better comparison following water management projects and continued land use changes. And we were able to illustrate with our NDVI analysis that the management efforts that they have done have been effective in removing Phragmites. So yeah, I just wanted to thank you guys again for the money to do this project. Yeah, it's been great.
Thanks, Claire. It was great to fund the first phase of the project and then also to be able to fund the second phase of the project. So thanks so much for presenting, and I'm sure that, yeah, I knew there'd be questions. And go ahead.
Well, first, thank you very much. We're really representing the Nature Conservancy. We're really, really thankful that you guys were willing to do this. And we just had a meeting last week with what are they calling the flows?
Functional flows.
Thank you. The functional flows group, and they're tying, possibly talking to all the different wetland managers around the lake, saying, what information do you have? So what you can get. And so this is really what all of the managers need. Mm-hmm. And so I brought it up that this was going to be available, and that we could, I don't know how much we're going to be able to apply to each one, right? Because there's so much, you did so many variables, and we're so appreciative of it. But basically a lot of them are managed the same way. And some of the inferences that you have with precipitation and then available kind of the temporal conditions that you have could be also applied, I think, to a lot of the management too. So this is really timely and really, really needed. And I would really, really love to see the final product, as well as I think of having some of the raw data available for some of the other managers, because everybody is worried that as we dry up, we're going to need more water. And if we don't have it, if we don't grab it now, it just won't be available. Mm-hmm. So thank you. Thank you, Hugh.
Yeah, Hugh, jump in wherever you want.
You're welcome. Thank you. I want to temper expectations on the final report because we're working on it, but I keep getting sideswiped on things. But we're pretty close. All we really need to do is add the data from 2023 to the initial report we wrote. So one thing we kind of skipped over, change in storage. It's got to be within the limits, the fairly wide error limits of the outflow and inflow estimates. But Claire, I was wondering if we should look at the flow measurement points along each stream and see if there's a gain or loss along those, because that might be where most of the storage change occurs.
Yeah, I wanted to do that along Case Creek and didn't have
Sure.
resources.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank
you.
you. Janice. Yeah. Janice, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for an awesome presentation. I'm so excited to see this because Ashley Kajowski and I, a number of years ago, interviewed wetland managers, and this is one of the questions they had. So it's so cool to see this come full circle. And the question I had was, do you think that this can be replicated across, the waterfowl management areas pretty easily? And do you think it will help inform all of these wetlands, truly understand what their water needs are so that they can go after more water rights and things like that?
Yeah, I think, it was pretty time intensive taking all these measurements, but there's definitely need, like along the Great Salt Lake, to really be monitoring how much water is flowing into these areas. So in that way, definitely, yes, I think like setting up as much water monitoring and stream monitoring as we can would only be a good thing, right? And yeah, and then the mapping and stuff, and NDVI analysis is pretty, you can do it from a laptop, and if you're fast at it, it can be pretty fast. Yeah.
So Claire, were there any overland flows that were difficult to measure? Didn't get into your analysis?
Yeah, Holmes Creek wound up being pretty hard for us to measure, in no small part due to the fact that West Davis corridor, that big highway that just got in, was under construction for a lot of this, our project time, and so it was kind of like under heavy equipment and kind of hard to access for a lot of it. And then when we did try to set up a stream gauge station there, it got washed out, and so we had to go off of some of our like seasonal measurements for that site. And then, like I said, a lot of the surface flow kind of just diffuses out like in the lower parts of the preserve and into those crack fields, and that's basically impossible to directly measure. So
right. So we have somebody trying to see if drone-based measurements would be helpful in an area.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have something that's difficult to measure or difficult to get into, we have somebody who would like to apply.
okay.
So what's the lowest elevation that the Phragmites are going to? As far as the right.
I do not know the answer to that. Does anybody know the answer to
Okay,
that? Keith? I do not know the answer to that.
If the lake were to rise into those areas, would those kind of die off? Happens,
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
A lot
should-
of the preserve actually was under that 80s flood area. I think it flooded up to.
So what happens when those Phragmites get flooded?
It depends on salinity. If it's really salty over time, it will die.
Underwater.
But if it's not that salty, it'll thrive.
Oh, well, that's not so great.
But it's easier to kill when it's wet, so we can get rid of it if there's a lot of water. Better than the current conditions where it's dry. It's hard to get rid of it when it's dry like that.
They wind up like flattening it out. They spray it and then they flatten it, and then they let the cows out to kind of munch on the younglings.
And Farmington Bay doesn't really get all that salty,
Yeah.
so would the salinity of Farmington Bay harm the Phragmites at all?
I guess according to what Hugh was saying, probably not. It was probably
Is somebody doing
Bay
a
went
study?
way up. It was probably
Yeah, we'd like to do a study to better characterize that. So maybe that's a good tech team idea.
Yeah.
But basically, it's really trying to understand how different salinity along time affect Phragmites.
I think the real benefit you'd feel with the lake coming up would be like if you were to cover a land bridge to just Antelope Island and allow that portion of, the south arm to reconnect, but anything that's coming back flowing through the, culvert between the causeway, I don't think I would ever get seaweed enough, in my opinion, to do much to the frag.
We do know that there's a saltwater wedge, right, Dwayne? That when you did your study, that there was just like the breach, there was salt water coming into Farmington Bay, but
salt water, yeah, does intrude in at when the lake's up probably 2 or 3 feet more than it is now. It doesn't extend that wedge, however, doesn't extend the whole length of the bay. So, and I'm guessing it might not extend to the preserve, but that's all dependent on if the lake were to come up 8 feet, Greenmon, yeah, then you might get a wedge that would extend that far.
All right, we've got, Bill has been waiting so patiently to ask a question. So Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Marisa. So excellent presentation, Claire. Along the lines of what Jeff wrote, I'm curious about whether in that shallow aquifer you were able to see any gradients upward or downward in your piezometers. Did you guys check that?
Hugh?
Yeah, we do see a downward gradient in adjacent wells at different depths at 10 feet and 6 feet, that kind of depth range.
Okay, that's useful because farther out in the playa, even at those shallow levels, we see an upward gradient, right?
That's right.
We're seeing that transition between the proximal to the mountain front where this is being done versus closer to the lake out in the playa. So that's interesting, right? I'll be really interested when this report comes out.
Yeah.
And another technical question, Claire, when you did the groundwater or the surface water inflow balancing what was going to be consumed by evapotranspiration by the Phragmites, did you include the groundwater component in that too, or no?
Yeah, I wound up subtracting that.
As of yesterday.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, so I kind of wound up doing almost like a mini water budget for that Phragmites area on the outflow, under kind of the assumption that, I guess then for this outflow area, the surface water in, or the surface water out, and the surface water, or the groundwater out would be about 0, with the assumption that it's all getting used up by frag. So yeah, we wound up subtracting the groundwater component from the PET.
Okay, all right, thanks. Yeah, I'll be really interested in this. And in the bigger picture, understanding, in fact, how much the Phragmites expansion impacts the inflow to the lake is going to be important to understand. Thanks.
Bill, you took the words out of my mouth. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Speaking of Phragmites, Keith has also been waiting patiently, and we probably only have time for Keith and the folks online for the 2 comments, and then we'll move on. But Keith, go ahead.
A handful of comments to Janice's point about doing this also for the WMAs. My guess is it would be a lot more straightforward to characterize the hydrology WMAs. Everything is controlled by water structures, so measurement should be a lot easier.
Yeah.
And then just speaking to the use of this data, we've already started using this to plan for Phragmites treatments of that whole area. And so we found this data to be super helpful for management already. And then we kind of, so the comment about how much water is consumed by Phragmites in this area and what it looks like to remove it. We've started working with UGS to use this information and then take it a step further with any covariance tower that was installed into the preserve to look at the impact or water consumption of Phragmites much more closely. And we'll that Eddy covariance tower where we're measuring ET, we'll be able to do before and after, because it's currently in a giant stand of Phragmites where we'll start treating it next year.
Thanks, Keith. So then just a quick couple questions online from Jeff. First, can you please show the final average water budget slide? And then how much water pushes through into Farmington Bay?
Yeah, okay, so here's the slide. And yeah, what we were kind of, for the sake of our water budget for the preserve, we kind of made a generalization that for a lot of the year, most of it is getting used by frag, and so we weren't actually able to like measure how much is going out into Farmington Bay because of that. Even though like during spring runoff and big precipitation events, like that water does actually flow into the bay, but for the sake of our budget, we're working off the idea that maybe a lot of it or most of it is getting used up by the Phragmites.
And the temporal.
Yeah.
Great. And then lastly from Annie, were you able to constrain uncertainty on each of your water balance components? What's the magnitude of uncertainty in your result?
Yeah, that is something that we are still working through. I think our water budget is almost suspiciously balanced. So, yeah, that's something that we're still working through and we'll be able to put out when the report comes out.
Great. Well, thanks again, Claire, and thank you, Hugh. It was awesome to hear about the good work you've been doing with Tech Team Fund. So thanks for presenting.
Oh, I do have one point. The thing that's really cool about this study, and he was very excited about it. The first year was a drought year that they did for the water balance, and the second year was the wet year. So I would really be interested in seeing the difference between the 2 years. I know that's going to be a pain, but you don't have to do it, maybe. So.
Yeah, we wound up kind of averaging over the 2
Sure.
years, kind of hoping that it's maybe more representative of a normal year. But
I don't think we have those.
right. Yeah, that deal.
And to your point too, even a third year, you really need to see what the lag is in getting the water, through in the groundwater aspect of it.
Yeah.
Do you want to put that as a topic
I
that
think
needed
it
more
would-
money?
maybe it'd be
More money?
interesting to learn more
It's
about
happy
that.
to post.
Great. Well, thanks again. And we'll move on to Pete and Rebecca now. Yeah. Hi. You came for the slow clap initiation.
This is it. Didn't print out notes. Can't remember what this does.
Yes. How do we get into
You usually go to present.
You guys are the young ones. You should know all that.
We're like the terrible middle ground where we don't actually know any of this.
Subtitles.
You click those 3 buttons. You should present your video. There we go. And that's
Okay, that's.
You might have to unshare and
All right,
then reshare.
unshare, reshare. Sorry, guys.
Did anyone miss the sign-in sheet?
Her name. Yeah.
You want to make sure you're sharing your entire screen.
okay. I just run
Right.
notes.
Oh, I'll share my entire screen. Thank you.
Yeah.
Who's our new visitors on the committee?
I'm the division planner for Forestry. We apologize for being charged.
Glad to be here, Emily.
The notes is- Yes, okay. Don't want to ruin the surprise.
And I'm not be embarrassing that you guys will all read it and I can remember to introduce myself. But I'm Pete Goodwin, obviously. I'm with the Geological Survey. I'm presenting work that my co-author Rebecca and I did, who mapped and modeled Phragmites on the Bear River for Refuge. I'm excited to talk about it. Actually, I'm pretty cool results. So I guess before launching the presentation, just give everyone an outline of what I'll talk about. First, I'll try to explain how the project came about, some of the pieces that got us there. Then I'll talk kind of the major components of the project, and then I'll dive into some of the results and findings. It would be impossible to talk about mapping and modeling Phragmites without talking about the plant itself. For those of for anyone who doesn't know it, it's a non-native, highly invasive grass that can form these dense monocultures like what you see on the right. They choke out native plants. They are poor wildlife habitat, and they represent a potential source of water loss to Great Salt Lake. So controlling them is a top priority for managers. And fortunately, it is a difficult to eradicate species. Steve can speak to that. But generally, it seems like it takes multiple management actions over 3+ years to effectively eradicate it, which is a substantial effort to treatment. So one of the tools managers use while managing Phragmites is Phragmites mapping. They rely on mapping to understand the scope of the infestation, prioritize which areas to treat, and then some of the nuts and bolts of plants. How much are they purchased for stop spraying?
You can get that little hide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So there are existing Phragmites maps. The National Wetland Inventory, NWI, is probably our most recent. It is 10 years old. Yeah. And if you see on the map on the right, the orange boundaries is the Phragmites in the NWI data set. You can see it clearly has not paced with Phragmites expansion on the Great Salt Lake. That's an area just north of Farmington Bay. So managers need new mapping. They need mapping that's accurate. Easily updated with new imagery, but also scalable in the sense that they need to use maps to plan specific treatments, but also review Phragmites across the entire management area like Farmington Bay. Thankfully, that is something that's modelable in the sense that models are well suited for this sort of task that you can easily update imagery, the source imagery, and you can apply them across large areas with minimal additional effort. And our ability to model Phragmites is getting better as we continue to collect better imagery and develop new technologies to leverage analyzing those massive data sets. Thanks. So modeling, most vegetation modeling relies on remote sensing techniques to analyze imagery, classify it into categories, and then produce results. Most vegetation models have a couple common elements. They use recent imagery to make sure you're capturing most current conditions. And they tend to be supervised by training data. And that means that they use data to help computer what. If you take a look at the image on the right, that's some of the training data we created. It's in our modeling project to help computer everything within those red areas is either treated Phragmites or water. So Forestry, Fire, and State Lands understands this need, and they're working on a multi-tiered modeling approach. I stole this figure from Gabriel Savagny to kind of describe the Forestry, Fire, State Lands approach, but they're basically looking to model Phragmites at multiple scales, sort of the tens of acres all the way up to hundreds of thousands of acres. But they are running to the same issues that managers have. They lack accurate training data or accurate mapping for the model, and they lack recent imagery on the model. Which kind of brings us to our project. So we collaborated. This project is a collaboration with Forestry, Fire, State Lands, staff at the Bear River Refuge, and us, obviously. When we had 3 goals, we wanted to create training data for the Forestry, Fire, State Lands model. We wanted to update vegetation mapping on the refuge, and we wanted to explore modeling workflows. And our project area focused on the lower refuge, unit 6 through 10 on the map on the right. And as those were areas that the refuge managers flagged as a priority. For our project, we mapped Phragmites with 2 approaches, a manual mapping approach and random forest models. And we assessed the accuracy of each mapping approach using field data and training data we created during the plot. For our manual mapping, we relied on a photo interpretation approach, which is our typical wetland mapping approach, where a mapper reviews imagery, identifies a distinct feature, and then draws a polygon around that. That video on the right just looks like a great job of representing what we typically do. For our manual mapping, we identified 11 vegetation communities, 3 of which were different types of Phragmites. The first was a dense Phragmites. Yeah, kind of this obvious monoculture, and that's all we all think of as Phragmites. One of our other vegetation Phragmites communities was treated Phragmites, which includes everything within all Phragmites within the treatment area. It includes kind of the dead stubble that you see in the foreground, as well as the re-emerging Phragmites kind of in the middle ground of that picture. Finally, we included a mixed Phragmites category where Phragmites are kind of interspersed with native vegetation. We mapped this to kind of capture emerging infestations. Like I said, we modeled communities. However, the modeling that we completed only mapped 4 communities. So when we compared our manual mapping to our modeling, we aggregated our mapping using the table on the right to kind of match the schemas. I should note that when we did that, we excluded the mixed Phragmites category, just as the way humans think about mixed Phragmites was very different than the computers picked that feature up. So for, like I said, no, good, I just got lost. Like I said, our mapping relies on imagery, and we used tasked worldview imagery provided by the Fish and Wildlife Service. That imagery was collected on July 20th, 2023. So you can see it's just generally higher resolution and also much more representative than our 2021 native imagery, which is our next best option. So pretty much that imagery for sure. Final part of our manual mapping was we just collected field data. We used that field data to assess our mapping accuracies. Our modeling approach was essentially a machine learning approach using Google Earth Engine, which means that we basically used, I didn't do the modeling, so this is my notes. Forgive me if I misspeak, but basically we used a computer to develop an algorithm to categorize individual pixels. We applied that algorithm to all pixels within the project area, and we used training data to teach the algorithm the correct decisions. And we used Google Earth Engine to rapidly analyze multiple imagery data sets for our project. Our modeling approach is adapted from work done by Walter and Mondel in Delaware, where they mapped Phragmites using naked imagery. The Walter and Mondel workflow included a principal component analysis within the imagery. Principal component analysis is just a data analysis technique to basically generalize the data set while preserving key variation. Their model used a random forest algorithm to classify the pixels into categories. And finally, their model splits the training data set. It uses 70% of the data to train and develop the model, and withholds 30% to test how accurate it was. We modified the Walter and Mondel workflow slightly, kind of on the series of images on the right, where we modified the data to create training data from individual pixels rather than polygons. So rather than 1 point per each training data, we found all pixels overlapping that polygon, then developed training points from each of those pixels. That allowed us to generate much more training data to train models. Like I said, we modeled 4 categories. The first was a dense Phragmites, upper left. That's very similar to our manual mapping monoculture stands. We modeled treated Phragmites on the upper right, which was all Phragmites that had been essentially killed by a treatment, so standing dead, extensive thatch. We modeled a shoreline category on the lower left, which was sparse vegetation, shallow flooding, or bare ground. Then finally, we included an other category, kind of on the right there, which is just a bit of a catch-all for us. We looked at several ways. We developed several models kind of exploring how imagery resolution, timing of the imagery collected within the growing season, and the training data supplied to the model, how they all affected resulting model accuracies. For the sake of this presentation, I'm just going to talk about our 2023 comparison because I don't want to talk for hours, but a lot of the findings that we have from that 2023 image comparison match what we saw for the growing season or the training that supplied. One more here. So for the 2023, we provided 3 imagery sources: our finest scale, the 2 meter world view imagery, a slightly coarser planet imagery, 3 meters, and then our coarsest 10-meter sentinel imagery. We trained it all with the same training data set, kind of that upper box on the right, to develop a series of models. And then we tested the model results with 2 data sets, the validation data. We tested with our withheld training data as well as the field data we collect. Yeah, I say we, but all this work, all this cool, really interesting work done by Rebecca. So that's kind of the project in a nutshell. And then I'm just going to switch gears and talk about some of our results. One of the things we really wanted to know is how accurate the mapping was. This inaccurate map is pretty useless. So we assessed accuracy using something called the confusion matrix, which, yeah, I know it's an apt name, but basically it plots what's mapped against sort of on the so it plots what's mapped versus what's observed in the surveys or the validation data, and you can assess accuracy. We use these to assess data set wide accuracy, sort of overall accuracy, sort of how often the map was correct. But that number can be skewed if you have a large category like shoreline that's basically most of your mapping. So we also assessed accuracy using something called a kappa statistic, which is less susceptible to that sort of skewing. Kappa statistics range from -1 to 1. Anything over 0.8 is considered very good. These overall statistics are really useful comparing model results to other model results for us. We also use confusion matrix to assess how accurately we did within individual categories. In this case, how well did we map dense Phragmites? And we looked at it in 2 ways. The first is a user accuracy, which kind of gauges the reliability of the mapping. And a good way to think about it is if you were to take the map in the field, walk up to a Phragmite stand, how often would the Phragmite stand actually be there? And for us, that we were very good. That was 100% accuracy. Kind of that blue box there, the horizontal blue box. We also looked at producer accuracy, which gauges kind of the completeness of the map. How well does the mapping capture everything on the landscape? For us, we were a little less accurate, 83%, and you can see this a few patches. And then just to take a step back, the accuracy assessments for our manual mapping, they're good. We were very reliable, like 100% reliable, being able to identify Phragmites. And our overall accuracy approached 100%, which is also good. Other vegetation modeling and mapping studies on the Great Salt Lake put that from 8% from what I've seen. So this is the confusion matrix for all of our 2023 imagery comparisons. Don't expect you to read all the numbers because they're terrible, but I'm just going to point out a few things. First, most approaches mapped dense Phragmites with 80% accuracy, kind of the values in the blue box. And the random forest models generally outperformed our manual mapping if you look at the overall camera values compared to what's in the black oval there. Second, our models mapped treated Phragmites less accurately than dense Phragmites as you look at the values in the yellow boxes compared to the values in the blue boxes. And third, when we validated the model results using the field data, we found the field data had reduced accuracy that's both individual and model. So looking at the values in the yellow boxes again to the values in the boxes. Generally, when we validated the models with the field data, they were less accurate overall and individually, but not consistent, or within individual categories, but not consistent and not in like very not in a pattern that we can point to or really understand what's going on. This accuracy reduction is likely an artifact caused by how we created the training data, where we created training data in very obvious patches that the model performed well in. And when we assess the accuracy using these relatively easy mapping areas, the model performed well. When we assess the accuracy using our randomly located field points, it probably included more mixed or questionable signatures, and the model did less well. It was scored less well in those questionable areas. So we also, well, this is going to be tough, sorry everyone. So tables only tell us so much, so we also did a visual comparison, just kind of checking the model results to each other to our manual mapping. And one of the things we saw was a general agreement for mapping dense Phragmites that you can see as this repeated orange shape that you can see in the manual mapping that gets repeated across each of the 3 models. However, the models clearly differed in how they mapped treated Phragmites, and that likely stems from the different definitions used by each approach, where the manual mapping identified mostly everything within treatment area, but the models tended to only pick out the standing data for batch. If you look at the panels in the middle, you can see, well, maybe you can't for both in back, but you can see that the manual mapping identifies a large treatment area. And you can see that it includes all this streaking from the herbicide spray. But the models really only key in on some of the dead brown patches within that treatment area. We found that as imagery resolution decreased, there's some generalizing of features, which led to sort of reduced detection of small Phragmites patches. And you can see that if you look at our manual mapping and then our highest resolution world view image, you can see there's this small linear Phragmites patch that gets less obvious in the slightly coarser planet imagery and is completely absent from our core system sentinel imagery. We also found that the models frequently misclassify treated Phragmites. One of the most common errors it did was it identified other vegetation within these treated areas, kind of these green pixels at the top of these little arrows here. However, the models also messed up in the other direction where they identified and treated Phragmites that was their treatment. So this arrow, this kind of black oval here is well outside of the treatment area, but each of the models picked out some treated Phragmites within that oval. So that was kind of the nuts and bolts of active assessment stuff. I'm going to switch gears and talk about some of our key findings. I guess first and most simplest is that Phragmites covers 7 to 8% of the lower refuge, with some units exceeding the target that Fish and Wildlife Service sets in their management plans. This is relatively not simple data, but this is foundational data that refuge managers need to understand how much Phragmites they're dealing with those treatments. One of our other findings was that we were able to accurately model obvious Phragmites with accuracies that were comparable to our manual mapping approach. However, modeling took substantially less time. It took us several months to manually map all the Phragmites and all the vegetation, and Rebecca was able to model Phragmites in a couple weeks. It was wild. However, the models did get confused and several factors contributed to that. Algae could really mess up the models, shallow flooding, and then vegetation regrowth in treated areas. All were areas the model struggled in. The models clearly did not do well at treated Phragmites. We mapped treated Phragmites way to monitor treatment success, and based on our results, probably more effective to rely on contractor provided boundaries and assess what's going on within those boundaries rather than trying to model it. Finally, I can't overstate the importance of the training data for models. We found a trade-off between capturing diverse signatures for each category while avoiding overlap between categories. And that trade-off is likely to be project specific, depending on your project goals and conditions within the project area. The high resolution imagery Fish and Wildlife Service provided us was incredibly helpful. It helped us clearly distinguish boundaries between communities, but also just helped us feel more confident in what we were seeing and identifying. And the other thing that really helped, we were familiar both with the project area, the vegetation within the project area, but also doing the photo interpretation and connecting the dots between what we see in the imagery to what's directly on the ground. And I would like to thank a lot of folks for this project. Obviously, this would not have been possible without generous funding from the Great Salt Lake Tech team. But we also had great collaborators with Fish and Wildlife Service and Forestry Fire State Lands, particularly Gary, Bobby, and Jen Wright, who were involved with the project from start to finish. Our work is building on work done by other folks. Matthew Walter and Pinky Mondell, as well as the authors, Gandhi et al. Those are the key papers we looked at, and they were very generous in sharing their expertise and their code to let us build our work. And finally, I'd like to thank all the folks who contributed to the field effort, mapping or collecting field data. It looks really nice in that photo, but unfortunately, that was not our conditions. It's great to wet a lot. So, thanks.
Thanks, Pete. Appreciate another really good presentation and utilizing this fund opportunity and also working with our division. I think this was really useful and hopefully lay some good groundwork for future vegetation mapping work. So we have a couple minutes for questions. It looks like Wayne was the first one to raise his hand. So Wayne, go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, in the photo you showed for other vegetation, it looked like you showed upland vegetation. So I'm just curious how well the modeling did in differentiating cattails and bulrushes from Phragmites.
Yeah, that's why we did the vegetation category. Those are hard split. Those are hard communities to separate because they look very similar. When we did the manual mapping, we did identify, let me scroll up a little bit here. We did identify a native marsh, kind of the cattails and bulrush you're talking about, Wayne. But for the models, we were really focused on identifying Phragmites. We chose to simplify and just kind of lump all that into all the other, everything else into its own category.
Okay, Pete, as far as the training data goes that you would need to have more reliability, would that be something like, I mean, are you looking for just higher resolution imagery or like multispectral lights that actually map the vegetation so you can plug it into this, or what would you need?
Well, we created the training data in a couple different ways. The one that was most effective for us was actually using our manual mapping, generating random points within that, and then taking a square, blowing that up into like a 10-foot buffered circle and using that. That was something that still required a lot of supervision by Rebecca, just to make sure that it matched what the correct community was, but also just to kind of shift it away from like community edges to make sure it was a consistent signature we thought. We used multispectral imagery. Typically, we just use 4 bands, the red, green, blue, typical, but also the near infrared bands included with most imagery. The worldview imagery that we provided had more bands, but we kind of focused on just the 4 common bands to give us a consistent set to evaluate from all of our imagery sources.
Any other questions for Pete in the room or online?
I just have a question. What next? So are we gonna try to get it better, or get better training like Ben said, or is this a hard stop and we're just keep on doing what we're gonna do?
Well, I don't know. I feel like that's a Forestry Fire and State Lands question. We were a small part of a larger modeling effort. They are Actually, Tommy, I don't want to speak for you. See what I'll do.
No, yeah, so we're basically looking at object-based classification as well as a spectral based, because what we saw today is very like a spectrally based classification where we're looking at the greenness, brightness, wetness, and near infrared. But we're now looking at these higher resolution data sets where we can actually see the structure of those plants. Kind of to Wayne's question, is like, okay, those other species that are out there, are we overclassifying? Are we missing some of those mixed vegetation communities and emergent vegetation communities? And so that's where we're hoping that we can get higher resolution imagery to look at the structure of those plants as well as the spectral signature. So that way we can inform our models with more training data and more information to see if we can get more accurate and different classes, because there's lumpers and splitters in the world, right? And so we're trying to figure out right now, it's lumped together into these big stands. I think they did a great job of lumping all this together. And now it's like where Wayne's kind of question is, okay, where's the bulrush? Where's the cattail? To my understanding, this is a pretty monolithic stand out there for Phragmites right there, or was there a good diversity out there with the
No, that was one of the reasons we chose that project area. It's like pretty simple. That area tended to not have a lot of bulrush or cattails kind of.
Right.
Phragmites for drier vegetation is a little simpler to just split out.
So that's what's next, is we kind of started with the kind of easier, low hanging fruit. And so now we're trying to look at more of those mixed vegetation so we can actually preserve those plant species that need to be protected for waterfowl and other wildlife habitat. And then targeting these emergent areas so we can really strategize and take care of it before it gets to these harder to take down, adult plant cultures.
So Tom, for those of us that aren't as GIS savvy, how do we get our hands on better, higher resolution imagery so then we can differentiate between those plant communities?
So what we're looking at is drones. So yes, what we're looking at is that drones and then contracting aircraft, manned aircraft as well as fly at low altitudes. And that's what we could actually then start to see those seed heads, the black seed heads, the dried out seed heads, those cattail seed heads. And so then we can actually see the structures of those plants and then start to use object-based classification in alignment with the spectrally based. So that's what we're trying to do is, but drones is what we're looking at, but it's limited to the area that it can cover. So that's where we're kind of at this excellent study where it's like, okay, what can we do with 2 meter resolution? What can we do with 3 meter? What can we do with the 10 meter? And so now we're like looking at sub-centimeter resolution to see what we can actually calculate. So
see a duck's eyeball.
counting petals is what we do.
So
our goal is to scale up and be able to do this the whole watershed.
Exactly.
And we keep learning all these lessons. One of the things that I learned from what Pete shared today is just how our efforts thus far is mapping in areas that are the hardest to map because we're disturbing it with Phragmites treatments constantly and we're reducing our accuracy. So that is helpful, but what we'd like to do is, learn these lessons, figure out a path forward to have this scalable for the whole watershed, and then do it on a regular interval. And so we have goals of like project level goals where we need higher resolution to make decisions on the management. And then we want like an overall view of the watershed Phragmites cover over time. Are there new infestations that we're worried about? Are we making progress on the whole? Are there people that we need to go knock on their door, tell them to control their Phragmites and that kind of stuff?
I thought you already did.
Yeah,
that.
we're good. We're already good.
So the only thing that worries me about, because I really appreciate that we can get better, but there are living things out there that are affected by the drone work. And so the birds, I'm really glad to say that you're doing it when the seed heads out. So that's usually fall migration as opposed to spring. It still could affect them, but it have less effect on a lot of the nesting.
Yeah, that's actually one thing that we're working with the DNI admin with is actually getting a certificate of authorization so we could fly drones higher and get better cameras so we have less impact on wildlife behaviors, because that's one of our big concerns, obviously, is mitigating any wildlife disturbances. We don't want them to change mating, we don't want to change behavior, we don't want to change any of that stuff. So that's where we're kind of at the flux of when is it manned aircraft, when is it satellites, when is it drones, and so like Keith is saying, that the goal is to get the entire shoreline. So
Thank
that's-
you, that's comforting.
And Tom, is the manned aircraft able to fly higher and get the same quality resolution as the drones?
Yes, typically you just pay more for the camera. They have a higher resolution camera. So.
Great. Well, thanks again, Pete and Claire, for presenting. Awesome to see our tech team funds getting put to good use. So thanks again. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next agenda item, public comments. So anyone in the room or online have any comments for the group? This can be announcements, funding opportunities, really anything under the sun that you think would be useful for the entire group. Lynn?
Sure. I want to extend an invitation to all of you to join Friends of Great Salt Lake on October 3rd. This is the place, Heritage Park, the garden place. We're going to be celebrating 30 years of our collective work on behalf of Great Salt Lake. And it would be wonderful to have you there to join us. There's information on our website, fogsl.org. So take a look and bring your friends. And, you know, we're all in this together. And I have to say, I should have had a seatbelt on because I am just so moved by the level of work and research that's going on behalf of Great Salt Lake. And it was kind of this similar to, say, listening to brain surgery, you know, I mean, for, you know, someone who's not on the level like you are, but deeply, deeply appreciate the commitment, funding, the vision, and the need. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Lynn. Appreciate it. Wayne?
Yeah, just a small thing. I think most of you know there's the International Society for Salt Lake Research, which will have its triennial conference in 4th through 8th of November. So get your plane tickets for that. But a smaller part of that, as part of that conference, we're having a photo contest. It's open to people worldwide, whether you're attending the conference or not. We don't have too many entries yet, so if you're a photographer, go to the islr.com website and submit those photos.
Awesome, Wayne. I might check that out. I've got an archive. Great. Any other comments? Yes.
So we recently released $5 million along with $1.5 million with the Great Salt Lake Watershed Enhancement Trust. So we're individually managing those two pots of funding, but jointly releasing the funding. So for all of you that manage wetlands or have projects or ideas to how to protect those, that is open now, and you can apply for those via the GSL web website. Maybe Marisa could share that out, that link. But anyway, if you spread the word. And
they're due.
do you remember the date? October 15th, I believe, but I'll double check on that. Okay, we'll double check on that and put that in the email when we send it out.
Remind me what the level of funding is for the quote unquote hot topics grants. What is that number?
Yeah, so currently we have around 500,000 per fiscal year, but that fluctuates with other potential needs that the division might have where our management is concerned. So this year we withheld a chunk of that for use on the mineral extraction study that we've been working on with USGS. And so there will be other needs that the division has for research that will directly inform our management that we will withhold from that grant pot. But like I said, moving forward in fiscal year 26, that's going to change a little bit with this procurement style grant project situation. So more to come on that, but that's more or less what we have now.
Thank you.
Yes, Keith.
I would like to introduce our newest employees, Hurlow and Talon. So we hired 2 new Great Salt Lake Restoration Coordinators. They're joint positions with the Division of Wildlife. So they're going to work for Forestry, Fire and State Lands as well as Division of Wildlife. They're going to be housed on the lake at the WMAs. So Arlo will be at Farmington Bay WMA, and Talon will be at Ogden Bay WMA. And so we're really excited to have additional help on all of our wetland restoration efforts and all the experience that these guys bring. They're both assistant managers at waterfowl management areas, so they know the lake well. They're pros at driving marsh masters. They've got all the skills. So yeah, just really excited to have them and to share the positions with wildlife. So we're really going to work on collaborating right on that boundary of the WMAs where the managed wetlands meet the lake bed.
Awesome. Can I have your autograph?
Thanks, Keith, and welcome, Talon and Arlo. We're really excited to have you. Great. So the last agenda item, just any member updates, research updates, other issues pertaining directly to the tech teams. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay. So our next and final tech team of 2024 is on December 10th in this room, not Soldier Hollow, in this room. You'll get emails from me again about that. And then again, another plug for if you want to present next year, or rather if you have a tech team grant you need to present, so please contact me and I can get you filled in. So thank you all for being here online and in person.
Can I just add one more thing?
Yeah.
Sorry. In anticipation of next year's grant release and the questions that we want to ask, if you're interested in being on a subcommittee to do that, would you all please just email us and let us know if you have a desire to help fill those questions, or if you have ideas already that you think might be valuable. Perhaps we can get the ball rolling so when we come to our December 10th meeting, we have a better idea of who's going to participate, and maybe even have some draft questions to present to everybody that we can run through.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Feel free to email me email me.
Versus more
usually the easiest form of communication. But again, thank you all for being here. You're all released or dismissed or whatever you want to call it. And I look forward to seeing most of you tomorrow at the advisory council. So thanks again.